Welcome to Beyond the Call podcast, where we tell the stories of those people behind the jobs we rely on. We go into the good, the bad and the ugly, and we shine a light in what can be a dark place. Just a warning, the content can be graphic and distressing, so please use your discretion. Please like and subscribe on your podcast platform and our social media. And if you have feedback, I read every single one. Let's get on to this episode of Beyond the Call. All right, g'day everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Call. I have got another guest who I'll introduce in just a second, but I just wanted to remind everyone about my new website, which is www.beyondthecall.au, and my email, which is now contact@beyondthecall.au. So we have Mark McConville. How do you describe Mark McConville? Well, in a nutshell, he's Australia's only stand-up comedian who has a master's in suicidology, and that's a heck of a combination. And we're going to get into how that all occurred. So, welcome, Mark. Great to have you on here.
Great to see you, Peter. Nice one.
All right. So, tell us where you grew up, and we're going to start from the bottom, and we're going to go on this whole journey. So, where did you grow up?
I grew up on the north side of Brisbane, actually, a little place called Albany Creek, and I was very fortunate that when we grew up, Albany Creek was like a little country town for like an outer suburb of the northern part of Brisbane. So I grew up in a time where it was, one of those, you get home from school, have something to eat, get changed, jump on your push bike, and boom, off you went. And as long as you got home before the street lights were on, you were okay, and it was fantastic.
Yeah, good old times. It certainly doesn't happen anymore, does it?
Oh, the things we got up to, it was just, we explored the world. It was awesome.
And thank God there wasn't Facebook or social media back in those days.
Thank God, right, I tell you what.
How were you as a student?
I was a bit crap, mate, to be honest. I wasn't really that interested in school, I was one of those kids that, because I grew up with, because I'm quite short-sighted, so I was one of those kids that grew up with the big, thick Coke bottle glasses, so I didn't want to sit right at the front of the class to see the board and, be one of those, students. So I ended up down the back of the class making trouble. And so and there was a bit of bullying that went on back then, but it was different. It wasn't like bullying's really in the news, and it's become a real thing now. But I look at what happened not only to me but other students that I went to school with at that time, and it's like we just dealt with it. And in actual fact, a lot of people go, about being a comedian, you go, oh, we're always funny. And I know myself, and there's a few other comedians that I know that kind of have a similar sort of thing, is, we learned very quickly that if you can make the other kids laugh, they'd leave you alone. You'd become a bit of a novelty act. So I never thought that it would end up being a career. I didn't start stand-up till I was 28, but I just developed that ability to make people laugh as a survival mechanism. Yeah. And it's quite common, actually, about amongst comics.
Yeah, and I think there's also something that if it's a really good weapon to put people down with if they are bullying you, and you can use sharp wit and sometimes it's not necessarily at their cost, but it makes them feel foolish.
Well, a lot of the time it was self-deprecating humor that I would use, you know what I mean? So like they would pick shit on me, but then I'd put shit on myself, which would then diffuse the situation. And so it made it kind of, for want of a better term, it gave me the upper hand.
Yeah, absolutely.
It diffused the situation that they were thinking that they were really upsetting me. And in actual fact, I was going, well, if I put shit on myself, well, then it diffuses what you're doing. So
yeah, you can't. Yeah, that's right. You're putting fuel on your own fire, and therefore their fuel doesn't count.
And in actual fact, and then later on in life, then when I, in recent years, when I've got into what I'm doing now, which is using humour and laughter therapy and education for people with stress, anxiety, and depression, I've learned more about the different styles of humour and all that sort of stuff. And there's a thing called the Humour Styles Questionnaire that you can use, and they give you, you end up with a score on 4 different styles of humour. 2 are positive and 2 are negative. But in actual fact, that research was done in the United States and in Canada. And the Australian sense of humour is so unique that we use aggressive humour and self-defeating humour in a positive way. We act like, according to that research, they're negative, they're maladaptive types of humour, but Australians use it in a way that, how many times have you heard someone go, if we like you, we put shit on you, mate? We
Absolutely.
don't mean anything by it. It's just our way of accepting you into our tribe. So technically, aggressive humour, right? Or self-defeating
Yep.
humour, which is what I used at school. But even as adults, we find ourselves amongst a group of people that we don't know. We put shit on ourselves as a way of saying, I'm no better than you guys, accept me into your group. The Australian sense of humour
Yep.
is so unique, really is.
Yep. So what did you want to do when you were at school? What was the dream growing up?
Oh, mate, all the guys around that, this was the 80s. Everyone wanted to get out and get a trade. That was the thing. The first chance you got to get out of school, you were out. So I left in 94. I went to TAFE, did a 12-month engineering construction course, which was like a bridging course into an apprenticeship, So it's weird. I specialised in construct. Like, you do 6 months of engineering and construction, and then you'd choose which way you wanted to go. And so I chose construction because I wanted to be a chippy, and so I specialised in that. And then when I left that school, left TAFE. I ended up getting a job in an engineering factory. And learning to weld for 4 years, So, and I got to
Yeah.
tell you, 4 years of welding, mate, it's a shit job, No matter what anyone tells you, you're only ever going to get so good at doing that.
Yep. And it's damn hot.
Oh, welding in summer in Brisbane outside wearing overalls. I mean, it was,
Yeah.
yeah. So I knew that that wasn't going to be my, like, after a few years, I knew that that's not where I was going to end up being. And so as soon as I had the opportunity came up, I think it was about 1990, I applied for a job as a sales rep, because I used to see all these sales reps come into the factory, the welding reps, the steel reps and all that sort of stuff. And I thought, what a cool job these guys have got. They just drive around, and they get their nice company cars, and they just, they're nicely dressed. They're not covered in shit, and they talk to people all day. And I'm like, sign me up. So,
Yep.
so then the crazy thing is that I went full circle, because I ended up getting a sales rep job in the construction industry selling timber to builders. Right. So,
So it wasn't a waste after all.
yeah, that's right. So, and I think, it put me in good stead, because I was able to talk to, steel guys about steel stuff, and I could talk to timber guys about timber stuff. And so I ended up working
Yep.
for Brett's Hardware, selling timber moldings and skirtings and architrave and all that sort of stuff. And then did that for a few years, and then ended up in the garage door industry, selling roller doors and panel lift doors and, automatic gates and all that. And so I was pretty much in the construction industry right through till, I was about 28. So yeah, 28
Yep.
when I started doing stand-up. Well, actually,
And
I,
the
I, I didn't.
and all of those jobs are sort of people jobs, people interaction jobs. Obviously
Yeah,
not the welding, but once you get into the sales.
yeah, it was great, and I was telling jokes on building sites for builders and that sort of stuff, and I just had the gift of the gab with these guys. And um, I was also a volunteer in the state emergency service from 93 to 98, and by the time I finished, like, I'm sure you're aware that, well, the SES is different now to what it was back then. But back then, when you joined up, if they saw that you had any nous and common sense about you, they offered whatever training was on offer you got to go through. So in the 5 years I was in the state emergency service, I ended up doing like land search operations specialist courses and senior first aid and team leader instructor and general instructor. And by the time I left, I was a judge and coordinator on regional rescue competitions, and I was travelling around to different SES units delivering a Tuesday night session on the psychology of rescue with one of the guys in our unit who was a psychologist. So it's really weird how all of that stuff at the time, I look back at it now and go, I had no idea that I'd be doing what I'm doing now at the age of 54, and yet all of that stuff contributed to what I do now.
Yep. Yeah, it's not until you look back. So when you were growing up as a young adult, into before you sort of got into the comedy game, who were the comedians that you remember and sort of loved?
Eddie Murphy's delirious, mate. Eddie
Absolutely.
Murphy's delirious. Billy Connolly, Rodney Roode, Kevin Bloody Wilson. And I don't know if you're going to know who I'm talking about. Some people do, some people don't. But Peter Cook and Dudley Moore used to do these two characters called Derek and Clive.
It rings a bell, but I don't recall it.
And I got to tell you, it was the rudest, most wrong comedy you've ever heard. And like getting one of those little cassette tapes of Derek and Clive, they were like contraband. You had to hide them from your folks.
Yeah. Do you remember? Did you listen to like Billy Birmingham, like the Wide World of Sports? And all of those?
All of that. The 12th Man, genius.
That was brilliant.
And Greg Ritchie, Mahatma Coat, and could you imagine him trying to do that now? No way in the world. He'd get carted off.
That's right. So for those that don't remember, in the footy show, it was a cricketer used to dress up in blackface as an Indian fella called Mahatma Coat, and it was just pure stand-up comedy, and it was done pure tongue in cheek. But obviously nowadays, it wouldn't get a gig; they'd be cancelled before they even got it off the paper. How do you compare comedy then to comedy now?
Oh, there's not real much comparison. It's there's the way the world's changed and what people find funny and what you can get away with and what you can't get away with. Political correctness has really changed the landscape for comedians a lot. The internet's changed the landscape for comedians. YouTube's changed the landscape for comedians. Back in the day, I remember, when I first, because I never set out to be a comedian. I wanted to be an actor, so I went to acting school and I did stand up as a result of that, and that's how it kind of panned out. But back in the day, they'd say, the agents would go, "Oh, you got to have a 3-minute promo clip. Any longer than that, and they'll tune out." And like you look at now and you go, if you look at all these TikTok videos and all that, it's like if you haven't grabbed someone's attention in 10 seconds, you're like, next.
Yep. Absolutely.
So really,
I just hate the concept at the moment of going back and cancelling people for the comedy that was done back then. I'm not a fan of cancel culture where we go back because things were appropriate for the culture back then, not now.
You're familiar with the Australian comedian big overseas, Jim Jeffries?
Yes.
Right. So Jim talks about this beautifully. He articulates it so well that he talks about the fact that, because he's getting in trouble for routines he did 10, 15 years ago, whatever, right? And he said, when I did that routine, the line was here, right? And a comedian's job is we walk up to the line, right? And we know where the line is, right? Okay. And sometimes we inadvertently go over it, but we're conscious of where the line is, right? Now, the line has been shifted back to here, right? Now, we didn't move the line. Society moved the line, so you can't blame us for something that at the time was accepted.
Yep, absolutely. Some of my favourite comedy is, like, I'm a big fan of Jim Jeffries. Went and saw him recently, Jimmy Carr, those sort of ones. I love comedy where you kind of like, Oh, I shouldn't
Now,
laugh, but God, that's funny.
how is it that I knew that you would be a fan of Jimmy Carr? Hey,
Oh, it may
I
have
bet you
something to
love.
do
I
with the
bet you love Bill
occupation.
Burr too. I bet you love Bill Burr too.
Yep, yep. So yeah, Jimmy Carr was a big one. He came about 18 months ago, I think it was, maybe
Yep,
12 months ago
yep.
to Townsville, and yeah, we had a bit of an unfortunate accident where a person in the crowd went into cardiac arrest, and I ended up doing CPR. This was about 30 minutes before he was due on.
So were you
We ended up
working
doing
at the
C.
concert?
No, I was a punter.
Right.
It was
Okay.
at the entertainment centre, and there was a gentleman who unfortunately had a heart attack, and he went into cardiac arrest, and yeah, we ended up doing CPR on him, and then it was a long, drawn-out job. He was quite a large man, and to get him extricated, and that took quite a while. But yeah, it was one of those things that we got a round of applause from the crowd. There was probably 5,000 people there. It was at the entertainment centre,
Yeah.
biggest venue up here. And then yeah, and then when Jimmy came on, he came on about over an hour late because of this situation. And the first thing he did was ask for a round of applause for the people that helped out and things like that, which was great. And one of the things that he does is he puts a number at the front of his show saying, you know, if you've got any heckles, questions, that type of thing, you know, do that. Please send them in. And I said to my wife, I said, should we send him a message saying, my dad just died. Am I able to get a refund?
Huh. Huh.
Yeah, people around me thought it was funny, but I'm like, well, I think he'd enjoy it, but I don't know if other people would.
Yeah. 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 He's a genius at getting away with what he does, and that's the thing.
Absolutely.
Like
Him, Ricky
the
Gervais.
guys, the guys that unfortunately, we've got a lot of younger comics coming through the system at the moment that see that type of comedy and think that, you know, they can get away with it. You know, they all want to come on and be, you know, Jimmy Carrs and George Carlins, and you know, and it's like, well, you've got to understand that these guys have got decades worth of experience before they go there. And I say to the young comics, an audience will let you take them to places that they didn't think they would want to go, right? If they trust you, right? Comedy is all about a relationship of trust between the comedian and the audience, right? And so, you know, you're not gonna get that trust in 5 minutes or ten
Yep,
minutes. You know, that level of trust is built over years. So so yeah, it's a changing landscape, stand up comedy now. You know, but
absolutely.
I can still look at Eddie Murphy's Delirious and Raw, and no matter how many times, like I've seen it countless times, and even though I could recite it word for word, I still find it funny. You know, I still laugh at it.
Yeah,
Timeless. It's
absolutely.
timeless.
Absolutely. All right, so let's go back. You've done the sales, and then you've gone into sorry, what was it you said you went to after that? Oh,
Uh,
the garage
yeah,
doors and
yeah.
stuff.
So I'm still in the building industry. I just pivoted from
Yep,
selling timber to builders and staircases and kitchens to garage doors and gates and that sort of stuff. So it was basically all the builders, all the customers that I had that I was doing that for. Now I sold them this, you know, which was,
yep,
and it was great. You know, it was boom time, Southeast Queensland, 90s. You know, this was all through the
yep,
90s, and it was boom time. You know, like I was making budget. There was tons of new building, built new homes going up all over the place, and I had a fantastic boss and sales manager and really good support team, and had a big area. You know, like I used to travel. My area was Brisbane River up to sometimes the Sunshine Coast and out to Toowoomba. You know, so on average, I was driving. It'd be nothing for me to clock up nearly 2,000 k's a week on the road. You know,
yep.
I look back at it now, and I drive around Southeast Queensland now, and I go, my God, there's no way that I could do it now. No way.
Yeah, it's a different world now. That sales job is all mostly online. It's very little driving and stuff like that. It's a different world.
Yeah, yeah. So, but yeah, it was good. And, you know, the SES was one of those things at the time where, uh, you know, being a volunteer organisation, you get out of it what you put in, you know, and I was Tuesday nights were our training night. Every Tuesday night we'd meet for training, and by the time I left, it was 5 years later. It was probably 3 nights a week and most Saturdays.
Yeah.
So it's just one of those things that, but I got so much out of that. I got so much out of that time, and we did some, we helped the cops on a lot of full on things because the police don't have the manpower to do some of the things that we did. We'd be out in storms, tarping roofs and doing land searches for evidence and all this sort of stuff. And
Yeah.
apparently, like, I know people that are still in the SES and they reckon it's a totally different organisation now to what it was back then.
Yeah.
Like it'd be nothing for us to just climb up on a roof and throw a tarp out and tie it up and boom, you're off to the next one. Whereas now there's got to do a risk assessment and witches' hats and harnesses, and like it's amazing. Like it's all obviously safety. That's all. It's obviously doing it for safety reasons. But I look at some of the things we did back then and go, geez, you wouldn't get away with that now.
Absolutely. What's one of the more memorable jobs you remember doing with the SES?
Three come to mind that really stood out in the time, and they come to mind for three different reasons. So one was a massive storm went through Bellbowrie, west of Brisbane, and out between our unit and so we were Pine Rivers, and there was Brisbane Central, and there was like a Kenmore out Brookfield sort of way. And between the three units, we tarped 122 roofs overnight and it was still raining while we did it. So you were jumping up, tarping the roof, and moving on, and because the storm just ripped 122 roofs off. So there was
Some of
that.
those supercells that come through town, through Brisbane are amazing.
Oh,
They are so destructive.
it's crazy. And so there's that one. Another one was there was a big fires went through. I think this was about 95. Fires went through Bribie Island and Beerburrum, and it was pretty bad. And so we were part of a unit that was working on Bribie Island. Over, I don't know if you know where I'm talking about, Woorham. It's over on the surf side of Bribie Island.
Yes.
And like it's a little estate. It was a lot different then to what it is now. And so the police had gone through and evacuated everybody out of their houses in this estate. And our job was to, we were going to the houses, climbing up onto the roof, blocking the downpipes and filling the gutters with water, right?
Okay.
And because I remember distinctly being on the roof of a 2-story house, and there's a road, and then across the road is bush land that is on fire. And I'm standing on this roof, and there are embers coming over my head and setting fire to stuff in the backyard, right?
Yep.
And so the whole reason that we're we're filling up the gutters with water is because gutters are full of leaves, all that sort of stuff, and rubbish, and it just takes the speed for a ember to get into that and set it alight, and once the roof goes, it's gone.
Yeah.
And so we did that. The whole afternoon we were up there filling up those gutters and stuff, and we were only allowed to work for 20 minutes at a time because the heat was so bad, and then one of the vehicles would come around, they'd pick us up and they'd take us out to this like a checkpoint, and then the paramedics were there and they'd give us a check over and douse our eyes and fluids and all that sort of stuff. So we had to rest for 40 minutes and we could only work for 20. So I don't know what that ratio would be now, but I'm very proud of the fact that we didn't lose one house in that building estate from the work that we did.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Which was great. And the last one that comes to mind is we were tasked with an elderly gentleman had gone missing up near the Caboolture River. And the reason this one really sits with me is because it formed a turning point in my role in the State Emergency Service. So they'd found the guy, and it was obvious that he'd put himself in a position to take his own life in the swampland and the rising tide of the Caboolture River. And so we were all at a staging area, and this would never happen now. This would never happen now. So one of the head guys organising the search got up on the back of a ute and said, I need 6 people to come with me we found him, right? And I need 6 people to go and retrieve him, right? And of course, all of the gun-ho, the SES, because it's a voluntary organisation, you get the gun-ho people want to, get on the news or whatever. And so, of course, 6 people put their hand up, and they were going to retrieve the body, right?
Yep. With
no prior experience of what that situation was going to be like, right? Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until later on that day that I was sitting down with one of the guys in my unit who was a psychologist, and he was saying, he goes, that was so poorly done, he said, like, you got to think of what those people saw and experienced and all that sort of stuff. And, because he'd been in a swamp for a day and a half by the time they found him, and, whatever that looks like, right? And so, and then he said, he goes, there's this whole chapter in what was the SES handbook back then, which was the Psychology of Rescue, right? And so Craig Flintoff was his name. He and I sort of sat down and went, this really needs to be spoken about a lot more, because that situation shouldn't happen, And and so he and I basically designed a 2-hour evening training thing that wholly and solely focused on the psychology of rescue and making sure that you've got the right people for the right jobs, and understanding that if you're in a vertical rescue situation, you've got guys rappelling down the cliff, and people want to be there doing all of the exciting stuff, but in actual fact the guy that's standing at the edge of that roadway with a roadblock telling people that they can't come anywhere near it have a job that is equally as important as the people that are rappelling down the cliff, So that really turned a corner for me with the SES, and that's when I felt like I was able to contribute a lot more.
Okay. Yep. Okay. So, and then you sort of mentioned before going where you started at acting school. How did that come about?
I had a midlife crisis at the tender age of 28.
Fair enough. Were you single, married? What was your status at this time?
Look, I was in, for all intents and purposes, I was in a great place. I had a beautiful girlfriend at the time. I had a good job. The sales rep stuff was great. The SES stuff was ticking along. I was had a good bunch of mates, and so on the outside everything appeared great, right? But inside I was just unhappy, because I kind of knew that I knew that my life was destined for something, and this wasn't it. But I didn't know what it was, right? At the time, I didn't know, and so I needed to do some soul searching. So I ended the relationship, moved out of the house, got a little 1-bedroom unit at Strathpine, and spent about 6 months doing some soul searching and what do you want to do, and that was when I came up with, well, I think I'd really like to be an actor. I think I'd really like to, because I always liked the attention at school and when I was making people laugh and all that sort of stuff, and I thought, I reckon I
So
could do.
had you done any actual acting?
No, a couple like little school play, that was it, but I
Yeah.
was all right in front of people, because
Yeah.
being a sales rep, you're talking to, I could talk to the guy that's paying $4 million for the house, and I could also talk to the labourer who's digging the hole for the trench or something,
Yeah.
So I did a bit of investigating as to acting schools. I found what was then the Actors Conservatory in Brisbane. They did an intake twice a year of 14 students, and it was method acting based, very intense course for 3 years. And so it was 2 nights a week and half a day Saturday. And I thought, yeah, I'm going to audition for that. And I auditioned. I got in straight away, first intake. And
How did you audition? How does somebody who hasn't acted audition for an acting school?
so what you had to do is you had to do 3 things. You had to do like well, not like a soliloquy, but you had to like do a piece of a play or something like that, some dialogue from a movie or something. That went
Yeah.
for about a minute and a half. Dramatic. It had to be a dramatic piece. You had to tell a joke, right, which I had quite easily done, and you had to do a movement piece to a piece of music.
Okay.
So, yeah. So I can't. I couldn't tell you what I did. I can't remember. I couldn't even remember the joke that I told him. Honestly, I've got no idea. But so I got in, and then I'm in a class, 14 guys, 12 of them are girls, and there's me and one other dude. 14 girls and me and one other guy.
Okay.
And the school put on like a free cabaret show, like about once or twice a year. They would put on like a free community event for the students to perform in for their friends and relatives and that sort of stuff, right? Okay.
Yeah,
And
a
so,
showcase type thing.
yeah, that sort of stuff, right? And it's all free, right? And they were putting this one on, and I looked at all the things that they were going to do on the night, and I said to them, I said, there's no comedy. I said it's all drama pieces, and a bit of music and stuff, and a bit of stage combat. And so my teacher at the time said, "Oh, you want to get up and tell a few jokes, do you, McConville?" Right? Because I was mucking around in class and stuff, and I went, "Yeah, right. I don't care. No worries." They said, "What do you reckon? 10 minutes?" And I went, "Sure, no worries." So April 26, 1998 is my anniversary date. So at the Hamilton Town Hall in Brisbane on a Sunday night, I got on stage. I did 10 minutes in front of about 90 people. Told a few jokes, told a couple of stories from my childhood. Everyone laughed at the right bits, and then so that was the Sunday night, and then on the Wednesday I go into the acting school in the city in Brisbane, and in the foyer they've got all these arty-farty black and white photos up on the wall of everyone that performed on the Sunday night, right? And there's a photo of me standing there holding a microphone. Right. And I'm looking at it going, how funny is that? I look like a comedian in that photo. Right. And I've actually got that photo in my office. Right. I still
Yeah,
have that
nice.
photo. Right. And then the dean of the acting school comes out, Marcus Hogan, and he said, I thought I heard your voice in here. Come into my office. I need to speak to you. And I think, oh shit, I'm in trouble. What have I done? Thinking, what jokes did I tell? Right? And so he takes me into the office, and then he said, "So when you auditioned to get into the acting school, you never mentioned anything about being a comedian. How long you been doing stand-up for?" And I said, well,
10 minutes.
yeah, I said, that was the first time I'd ever done that. And he said, well, clearly that's your thing. He said, clearly, if that's a first, he said, that is your thing. He said, stick with the acting course because it will help your comedy career tenfold. He said, but you really need to start to look at investigating, doing open mic spots and all this sort of stuff. So, which was the best advice I ever got given. And then I stuck with the acting course, and then 3.5 years later, I'd been doing open mic gigs around Brisbane and stuff and meeting interstate comedians, and then they were putting a good word in for me down in Sydney and Melbourne. So at the age of 31, I quit my full-time job as a sales rep to pursue stand-up full-time.
Yeah, wow.
I was getting enough work not to support myself, but I was getting enough work to see that it was going to take off. So from
Yeah,
there,
and then the more you invest, the more you can grow
yeah,
it.
and so from there, one of the professional comedians, Jimmy Poulos, had a shop in Brisbane which specialised in, if you're restoring an old Queenslander, this is where you would go for fireplaces and tiles and lighting and bathroom stuff and all building materials. And him and I got to chatting at a gig one night very early on, and he said, "Well, look, why don't you? You've got a background in the building industry and stuff. Why don't you come and work for me for 3 days a week and give you a bit of extra income and supplement your comedy, and we'll just see how that goes." And I ended up doing that for probably nearly 7 years, until
Okay,
I well, I actually stopped that when I moved to the Gold Coast in 2007, and then I worked for Dreamworld for a couple of years as an actor in their entertainment department,
okay.
which was a
So
scam.
when you first
I was
did
getting paid to play.
going back to this first gig you did, that first 10 minutes,
Yeah,
do you remember your process of writing it?
no.
Did you make up your own jokes, or did you
Oh,
were they jokes you'd heard?
oh yeah. I probably told a couple of old jokes. I really couldn't tell you what it was that I did on the night now. But I learned very early on that you've got to, as a comedian, you've got to have your own voice. You've got to have your own material, So
Yep.
once I started doing open mic nights and starting to hang out with actual comics, it became very evident that, they said, you got to have your own material, write your own jokes. You'll actually do all right at this. And
Yep.
so, and I was a student. I looked at doing comedy as an apprenticeship. I wanted to learn. I'd sit and watch all of the headlining comics come to Brisbane, and I'd sit and watch them do their shows, and I'd see guys like Shane Bourne and Jamoan and Dave Grant and Dave Hughes. All these guys come in and lift the roof off the comedy club, and I'd be sitting at the back of the room going, right, that's the level. That's how good you've got to be to make
Yep.
a living, and that's what I aspired to.
And how did you go with bombing? I mean, I imagine you learn more from a bomb, I imagine, than a successful night. So how did you go personally if things bombed?
Oh, you want to go home and crawl into the fetal position and suck your thumb for an hour, and I felt sorry for my girlfriend at the time. I was dating one of the girls in my acting class, and if I'd gone out on a Friday or Saturday night and done a gig and it had gone great, I'd go over to her place at 11 o'clock at night, and it's like, let's go out and do something and whatever. But if I'd had a shocking night and I'd died horrible death, I'd be a bear with a sore head and I'd be cranky. And but what
So
happens
she
is,
never knew what was coming home.
that's right. Oh yeah, she never knew, um, and the thing is that you progress through the industry. You progress through the industry to 5-minute unpaid spots, 10-minute paid spots, 20-minute support spots, MC, to headlining, the rate at which you progress through the industry and whether or not you progress through the industry at all is determined by you reducing the amount of times that you bomb.
Yeah.
Right? And you got to do it quickly. You got to reduce the amount of times you bomb quickly. So I learned very on the process of the best way to, and I say this to the young comedians now coming through, or anyone starting doing stand-up, I'd record it. I'd record every single show that I did. Just the sound. I had one of those little mini disc recorders. I didn't have, mobile phone stuff now. And so I'd record it, and like I'd write out just in bullet form what jokes I'm going to do. I'd record it, listen to it the next day, and anything that got a laugh, I'd put a tick on it, and anything that didn't get a laugh, I'd cross it out. I'd keep in the stuff that worked, chucked out the stuff that didn't, because you can't analyze it properly when you walk off stage if you don't have a recording of it.
Yes.
You go, no, I think I did all right. How did that joke go? What was my timing there? So I reckon I recorded every single set I did for probably the first 3 years.
Yep. Well, I've heard people like Dave Chappelle and Chris Rock, they still do that now.
Yeah, well, that's right. Well, I still do it now. Like when I'm on a cruise ship, I get an hour with an audience in a 1,000-seat theatre. I get to try out a bit of new stuff in amongst all the stuff that I know works, and I still record it.
Yeah.
And so that's how you get better.
Do you find it's the material can stay, but it's the delivery that can change, and that can be the difference between the bombing and the not? Like, do you fine tune the delivery?
A lot of people ask you, how do you remember all that? When you're on stage for an hour, how do you remember all that? I go, remembering it's the easy part. The hard part is delivering it in a way after I've delivered this material 1,000 times that I still think it's funny, right? I've still got to find the funny in it, right? So you're constantly fine tuning how you're delivering it, right? And you're changing your material. Like I'm now finding, you rehash stuff. I'm finding new ways to do old stuff, reinventing old material that I haven't done in years and putting a new spin on it and that sort of stuff. And plus, the acting course was a huge assistance to my performing skills, my voice production, my performing, my improvisational skills, just understanding that. Like I remember a classic weekend at the Comedy Club in Brisbane. I went and did a 10-minute set on the Friday night and I killed. They loved it. It was awesome. And then I went in the Saturday night, the very next night, 24 hours later, and did the exact same material, died in the arse. Right? Exact same material, died in the ass, right? And I'm like, what the hell just happened, right? And one of my comedy mentors, Mike Van Acker, came up to me and he said, do you know what just happened between tonight and last night? And I said, I've got no idea. Tell me. And he said, how many people were in here last night? And I said, maybe 150. He said, how many people are in here tonight? And I said, maybe about 40. And he goes, there's your problem. You performed to 150 people tonight. And it overwhelmed the 40 that were sitting there, and they went fucking shit themselves,
Yeah.
So it's being able to read the room and get your energy to match the audience. There's there's a lot going on when a comedian's on stage. We're pretty busy, like we may be just standing there, but we've got an inner dialogue going on of what's coming up next. Are those people in the corner enjoying it? What's happening up the back? How's my timing? If they're not buying this material, they need to switch and change to something else. And, so, there's a lot to it. There's a lot more to it than what I think people probably give it credit for doing stand-up.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned cruise ships. I think for quite a lot of people, that would be the first time a lot of people are exposed to stand-up comedy. Because if you haven't been to a comedy show or like a sit-down comedy club, for example, then whereas when you're on a cruise ship, they often have a couple a night or a couple throughout the cruise, an early evening, a late evening, and it's more an opportunistic thing for people to go and see comedians. So it's potentially an audience that has never seen a stand-up comedy act before.
Yeah, and they're great crowds, because you know, I do a late night comedy show, 10:30 at night. I come out in a 1,000-seat theatre and I've got them to myself for an hour, you know,
Yeah.
and they want the rude stuff. They're paying you to do an adults only show, you know.
Yeah.
And and working on cruise ships is so unique because you're living with your audience, you know. Before you do your gig, you're walking around the cruise ship, nobody knows who you are, you know, and
Yeah.
you're just observing everybody, you know. And then you do your show and then all of a sudden everybody knows who you are, and, you know, for the however long it is between your show and when you get off the ship, you know, you've got, you know, all of a sudden you've got this little mini bit of stardom. You know, you're sitting there at the coffee
Yeah.
shop trying to have a coffee and, it's the comedian, you know. You know,
Yeah. Half of them might not even know your name, but they'll know your face.
yeah, that's right, you know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I'm a big fan of cruises. Had you ever been on a cruise before you performed on one?
no, no, never. It was never in my wheelhouse, and so I think I did my first crew gig on a cruise ship was probably around 2006, 2008, something like that. And yeah, so prior to COVID, I was doing probably 12 to 15 cruises a year.
Yeah.
Whereas now, you know, the mental health work I do has kind of taken over a fair bit. So I think this year I might have done I got one to do in a couple of weeks and one over Christmas. I'll probably maybe do 6 this year, 6 or 7 this year. You know,
Yeah. Do they approach you or do you approach them?
nah, they approach me. So I look, when you work for yourself, in doesn't matter what industry you work in, whether you're a plumber, a builder, a tiler, whatever it is that you do, I think success is gauged by the amount of work that finds you, right? If you don't have to advertise for work and it's just coming in from word of mouth or whatever, that's success. That's successful, you know. And I'm very, very lucky. I say lucky, but I did work for it, that I really haven't had to chase work for probably about, I don't know, maybe 15 years now. You know,
That's awesome.
I'll get a phone call from the comedy club and they'll go, get out your diary, put in some dates, you know, are you free for
Yeah.
this cruise or this cruise? And I've got corporate booking agents and that sort of stuff, you know, because I MC conferences and do keynote speaking, and so not having to chase work is, you know, no matter what industry you're in, I think if you get to the point where it finds you, you must be doing something right. And it's been
Yeah. Absolutely.
finding me for a long time now.
Yeah. What about the culture of drinking and comedians or substance abuse, that type of thing? Is there pressure to, you know, I think there's an image that people get on stage pissed, especially early on in their career, but I'm imagining it's you've got to be so acutely aware of like you said, you're really busy in the brain when you're on stage. Being half cut probably isn't helpful.
Oh, look, I'll be honest, I've done gigs stoned and bloody drunk, and it's a disaster, you know, and
Yeah.
you know, and you do that when you're first starting out because you see the other guys doing it and they're like, well, if we're half pissed, you're going to be half pissed, you know, or whatever. And so, but I always knew that it was a job. I looked at it as a job, and you know, you don't drink when you go to work in any other job. Why would I do it when I go to do this one? You know, so even now when I'm at a gig, you know, I might have one or two beers or something throughout the course of the night, but you know, and you know, a lot of things changed as well. You know, like this, the industry's changed where the people that are the professional comics are professional. You know,
Yeah.
like if you're gonna make it and go through, and you know, you look at all these comedians that race around doing comedy festivals and all this sort of stuff. You know, these guys are, you know, doing sometimes 20, 30, 40 shows in the space of a month back to back. You know, sometimes they're doing daytime shows and nighttime shows, and you know, you've really got to have your wits about you. And a lot of the festival comics that race around doing all the festivals, you know, they're writing a new hour's worth of material every year. you know, which is a
Yeah.
huge amount of work, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
no, a lot of it's, you know, it's maybe a bit of a myth that we you know, we're all up there half shit faced.
More of the party, and I guess it's one of those sort of almost like a marketing tool. If you're part of the party atmosphere, you make it easier to relate to. Blah blah blah. But like you said, if you're half pissed,
Yeah. And the days of, you know, do you remember Dave Allen? Do you know who Dave
yeah,
Allen is? Old school comic, very, you know, well dressed, 3-piece suit, used to sit there having a cigarette, dusting the ash off his pants with his whiskey sitting there, you know. It's
yeah,
classy.
yeah. That's more of a brand for someone now. If they're going to do that, they kind of manufacture that as a brand.
Yeah, exactly. You know.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
yeah, it's changed a lot. Just in the 20, like say this is my 26th year doing stand up this year, and just in the time that I've been doing it, it's changed so much. It's changed so much.
yeah,
But I'll never
yeah.
not do it because I
So,
love it.
do you prefer? Do you have a preference to where you perform? Like, do you like little clubs? Do you like big audience? Do you have a peak audience that's sort of you found is your comfort zone?
Doing a gig on a cruise ship is a treat, you know, because it's a treat. You're not only, you know, in this nice big ship and tripping around meeting people and stuff, but to be given the responsibility of doing a big show to 1,000 people twice in one night, you know, um, it's you're not going to, you're very rarely going to get that on land, you know.
Yeah,
So there's a lot of pressure on you to make sure those shows are kick ass. You know, there is a lot of pressure, um, but it's a beautiful gig. You know,
yeah.
but I like, you know,
So you have your early shows, which are often PG, and then the late shows, which are your R-rated shows. Do you often is that a hard switch?
well, it depends what they want you to do. Sometimes they'll only want you to do 2 R-rated shows. Sometimes you won't have to do a PG show. Sometimes you do. But generally, the PG show, it's like, you know, once you get to having been doing stand up for as long as I have, you know, like most comics of my vintage, you probably, like, I know I've probably got, if I sat down and worked it all out, I've probably got maybe 3.5 hours worth of material that I can draw on, you know. And so when I go to do like a corporate function at a conference or a luncheon or something like that, you know, it's got to be clean and safe and all that sort of stuff, you know. So most of us that are full time comics can pretty much pull out a half-hour clean show pretty easily.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So while we're on the cruise ship, this is where one of the events happened that was sort of life changing for you as far as your trajectory is concerned. Explain what that story was.
It was life changing. I had no idea at the time that it was going to be life changing. So it was back in 2012. Um, I'd done my show late night like any other time. It was all, you know, it was all good. Everyone laughed at the right bits. And then after the gig, I'm just sitting at the bar and watching everybody kind of filing out of the theatre, you know, and every now and then someone would come over, hey mate, thanks for the show, it was great, whatever. And then I see this couple kind of mid to late 30s file off the thing and walk over towards me, and I'm looking at them, and then I realise that this lady's crying, and I'm like, what's going on here? And then I got to tell you, no matter how many times I tell this story, it takes me back to that night. She came up to me and she wrapped her arms around me and she said, I don't know how I can possibly thank you because I have not seen my husband laugh out loud for 3 years. And I remember thinking at the time, 3 years, you know, because comedians get after gigs, people come up, go, mate, I've had a shit day, I've had a shit week, I haven't laughed, I feel like I haven't laughed in months. But 3 years, how's that possible? And so, and she was really emotional about it, you know, and he was standing there smiling away, and I thought, I want to find out what's going on here. So I talked to this couple for about 5 hours into the middle of the night, watching bloody sun come up just about, and it turned out that the guy was so this is 2012, right? So turns out he was an ex-SAS soldier from Western Australia who 3 years previously was in Afghanistan. He was conducting a patrol. He kicked open a door. It was booby-trapped and it blew him up, right? And so here's this guy standing in front of me going, mate, you've done more for me in one night, than 3 years of counselling and medications, post-traumatic stress management, because you just made me laugh for an hour.
Yeah.
Right? I will say I was pretty fucking funny that night. I was pretty funny. Like, everything works that night. And his wife, I hope you don't mind if I swore there. I'm
No,
assuming.
absolutely not. Go for your life.
I've listened to your other podcast, mate, so I'm sure that I can get away with it, right. So
Exactly right.
And it was his wife that was pissed off at the fact that she said, why is it that for the last 3 years the people looking after my husband's rehabilitation and his mental health at no point had said you're still able to laugh, you still got your sense of humour, you still find things funny, right? And it was really impactful because, in their eyes, I'd given her husband back and all I'd done was a gig, and I just wanted, when I tell this story when I'm doing my laughter clinic presentations now, I always make sure that I make it perfectly clear that in no way am I discounting the importance of the post-traumatic stress disorder protocols and medications and the importance of counselling and because I've seen firsthand how beneficial it can be, so it just so happened
You're
that
not saying the first medical action should be to go to a stand-up
that's
comedian.
right, exactly right. I'm just saying that for this guy, going to a comedy show was what turned the corner for him, right?
Yep.
And so it really sat with me, this couple, and I got off the cruise ship and I started to look at the old adage, laughter is the best medicine. And I got to tell you, something pretty funny happened when I was in Townsville last month, doing those laughter clinics for the Townsville University Hospital. I got to tell you, there's something pretty satisfying about getting about 30 doctors to repeat after me, laughter is the best medicine. You should have seen them unravel. I said, come on, what's that saying? Laughter is the best what? And they're all like, I'm like,
But it so much is like as a paramedic, my first job, my first mission when I went through a door is to try and get a smile on the face. If you can get a smile on the face, or if you can get a giggle out of the patient or the family, you've done 90% of your breakthrough work.
Oh, it's the therapeutic alliance. It's that alliance between the clinician and the patient, or it's a connection with anybody. Like humor is a way of connecting with people, is a fundamental. It's I could talk for 2 hours just on that. So but anyway, so at the time I'm just going, wow, this is there's a lot to this humor and mental health and laughter and health benefits and all this, and then this back in 2012, 13, and I started to look at what laughter does and the role of it in psychology, and I'm approaching it from a comedian's point of view, and then one thing led to another, and I ended up getting down the path of rates of depression and then suicide and attempted suicide, and I was like, my God, this is an incredible problem in society that I didn't really have any idea about. Like I'd been going through my own depression and stuff, but I had no idea that the suicide rate was what it was and the suicide attempt rate was what it was. And I thought, well, I actually work in an industry that can have a positive impact in this field, clearly from the effect that we had on that couple that night. And so I started to look at ways to create a formal link between the comedy industry and mental health. because I personally believe that everybody should be able to go to a comedy club on a Friday night, pay $30 for your ticket, and then take your receipt to Medicare on Monday and get a 100% refund, I reckon. You know, that's early intervention to me.
Yeah.
So I had a business mentor at the time who said, look, you're just a comedian with a cool idea. You got to get a university involved to do research. That's how things happen. And so we approached Griffith Uni at Mount Gravatt here in Brisbane. They've got the Australian Institute for Suicide Research and Prevention. We went in there and met with the then director, Diego DeLeo, and he really liked the idea as a unique approach to suicide prevention, humour and laughter intervention. So he said, I think you should come and study this master's degree in suicidology. I think you've got a lot to offer. And I remember thinking, oh, yeah, how hard can that be, right? And so they sent me the application, and because, I didn't know anything about university or anything. I left school when I was 14, and I said, well, look, I'm not your guy. This is a postgraduate degree. You've got to have a degree to qualify for this, And I said, I left school when I was 14 and started working in the factories of welder. I said, look, I'm not your guy. I didn't finish high school, let alone go to uni. And I didn't realise that this could be done, but they said, well, look, we like you and we like what you want to do here, and we think it's beneficial. So if you're up for it, we're going to recognise prior learning you for 17 years of being a comedian. So at the tender age of 45, I started university for the first time in my life at a postgraduate level. And
how overwhelming was that?
Oh, we still laugh
How
about
daunting.
my first assignment, because I stupidly thought that they were interested in what I had to say. So there wasn't one reference.
Yeah. You just made it up all yourself?
Well, just from shit that I'd been Googling,
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
so I very quickly found out. I got a tutor, and I had to learn how to learn. I had to learn
Yeah.
academia,
The university
Um,
game.
Yeah, and 3.5 years later, I did my dissertation, did a pilot study in my human laughter education program, and got the qualification. I think as proud as what I was about getting through it, I was also equally proud about, I think it was 2016, I actually got awarded the Griffith Award for academic excellence, because for an entire year I'd managed to get a grade point average of 6.5 or better.
That's better than good.
Yeah, so it put me in the top 5% of all students across all faculties. And I remember thinking at the time when I got the letter, I was thinking, geez, how fucking dumb is everybody else?
But was it a hard process for you, or was it something because that seed had been sown, it came sort of easily?
There were aspects of that degree that I found really hard. I found the research component hard, the statistics component hard, but there were other stuff that I found absolutely fascinating. The ethics of suicide prevention, the history of suicide, and learning about what are protective factors, what are risk factors, what's the difference between a risk factor and a warning sign. What are the difference between historical risk factors and environmental risk factors, and all this sort of stuff, So there was a lot of stuff that when I was going through it, I was finding certain subjects I was really getting into, and then other subjects I found quite hard. And at the same time, I was really learning how to write academic papers, academic assignments, and research and referencing, referencing. The amount of marks I lost just because of a fucking full stops in the wrong place. It should be a colon, not a semicolon, man. Fuck, really? It makes any difference, right? The APA style 5 of bloody referencing or whatever it is, and I was just like, really, is this really important in the big scheme of things that that's a colon and not a semicolon? I mean, for fuck's sake, So, but there was also times where, and and even now I still say this to people. There are times now, because you never stop learning in this field. There's always stuff happening, as you very well know. And there's times where I would learn something, and I'm like, I'm really glad I know that. That's really important information. I can see really how I'm going to be able to use that information. And then there's
Yeah.
other times, and even now, where I learn something, and I go, "Fuck! I wish I didn't know that." You know,
Yeah.
you can't unlearn something. You know, well, you
Yeah.
can't.
I'm imagining you went down some pretty deep rabbit holes.
Oh yeah, adolescent suicide, child suicide. There's some tragic shit. And
Yeah.
um, like I'm not a psychologist. You know, and psychologists and psychiatrists, there's a reason why they have supervisors, you know,
Yeah.
whereas every month they get to, talk about cases and clients and download and defrag and, get advice on different treatment protocols and what have you. Whereas I don't have that. But I am very, very fortunate that I made some really good close friends at the university as I was going through. My senior lecturer, Jacinta Hallgood, who's the program lead of the Suicidology degree, and Dr. Gavin Polk, who was my research supervisor. He's a forensic psychologist and a barrister. And so I could turn to these people repeatedly when I was feeling a little bit confronted with stuff, and I think the relationship that I built with them is what contributed to when I graduated in 2018. They said, "Look, you've really taken to this, and you're really doing some fantastic work." And by that time, I was starting to go out and do laughter clinic lectures and that sort of stuff, and based on my human laughter education program. And so they said we'd actually be interested in supporting you if you wanted to progress and do a PhD in this, right? And so I was about to get married at the time, or no, sorry, I just got married and we were about to go on our honeymoon. And I said, look, let me have a think about it, discuss it with my wife, because and basically we came to the conclusion that, and I said this to the people at the university, I said, that 3.5 years for me to get that master's degree, that was quite hard. That was really hard for me. Like I did it, but it was hard. It was a lot of. I was learning to learn, but I had to do that on the hop so I could keep up with everybody.
Yeah.
Um, and plus, I had obstacles put in front of me because I'm not a psychologist, right? So when I went to put my research proposal in for my dissertation, for my thesis, because I wanted to do a pilot study of my human laughter education program, I had to submit it to the Human Research Ethics Council, and get all ethics approval. And my research supervisor said at the time, just be aware that ethics tribunals and committees, they're always going to find something, right? That's just they've got to. That's what they do. They're going to come back at you with half a dozen things that they're going to need you to change. Just pre-warning you that it's a common thing. This is what happens. To brace me for it. And so they came back and they had 31 items that they wanted me to change. And he basically said, he goes, they're struggling with the fact that you're a comedian, you're not a psychologist, and you want to be helping people, in the field of suicide prevention. They can't get their head
Yeah.
around it,
You're an imposter, so to speak.
Yeah, that's right. And so, and this is where, and I say to people about having the support of people that believe in you and that are in your corner. It's amazing what you can achieve, So my research supervisor, and so Gavin Polk and Jacinta Hulgood actually went to the ethics committee on my behalf and said, "You got to get this guy through. Like, have you actually really gone through what he's?" And my research supervisor on a Sunday, and on his own time, not getting paid, had me in his office from 9 o'clock on Sunday morning till about 7 o'clock that night, and we addressed every one of those 31 concerns, and then he presented that to the ethics committee that week, and I got through. So, and I said to him, look, as much as I appreciate the support and the belief to do a PhD, I just don't want 3 or 4 more years of that. And what's it going to get me really at the end of it? I would rather use the knowledge that I've gained, which is pretty vast in relation to suicide prevention and suicidology. And I'd actually like to go out there and start to implement what I've learned and start to deliver my laughter clinics and use the knowledge that I've got to start to go out and help people and make an impact. And that was when they said, okay, if you're not going to do the PhD, we still want to hang on to you in some way. So they gave me an honorary position. So they made me, I've been an adjunct lecturer at Griffith Uni since 2018 when I graduated.
Okay. And at what stage or how were you developing what you wanted to do with your masters while you were going through it? Like, what was the end game for you, or when did you reach the vision of the end game, if you know what I mean?
Well, I knew that standing in front of people and talking was going to be my thing. I'm not a
Yeah.
one-on-one. I don't. I'm not talking anyone off a bridge or anything like that. I'm not, counselling people on one-on-one scenarios. I very much work in what's the early intervention space is what I talk about. And I realised as I went through that a lot of suicide prevention stuff is the equivalent of putting the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff, and I don't want to put the ambulance at the top of the cliff. I want to put the ambulance over here so people aren't contemplating walking towards the cliff in the first place. And the best
Yeah.
way to do that is early intervention. And, in suicide prevention, that you've got the 3 levels: primary, secondary, tertiary. So primary is keeping the population healthy in the first place. Secondary is identifying people at risk. And tertiary is managing those conditions and, more hospital beds and mental health wards and all that sort of stuff. And all of the research from around the world shows that primary prevention works. Keeping the population healthy in the first place is what is that is true suicide prevention, is early intervention so people aren't contemplating it in the first place. And what does that look like? Keeping the population mentally healthy. And what's the role of humour and laughter in that? And so that's when as I was, I was pretty much close to graduating when I was already starting to, I'd contacted my booking agents and said, look, I've got this keynote presentation now called the Laughter Clinic, and I developed that. And it took me a year or so to get the right mix of what that looks like as a presentation, because I'm talking about suicide prevention and humour and laughter and risk factors and warning signs and kind of putting it all together. And some people go, hey, how are you talking about suicide prevention being a comedian? What are you making? But then once they see the presentation that I give, they go, I get it now. I totally see what you're doing.
Yeah. So you developed that while you were doing your masters, and you actually gave some of those keynote speeches while you were doing your masters?
Yeah, Griffith University actually had me deliver them to every one of their campuses for Mental Health Week, I think in about 2017. So that's like I said, they believed in me.
Yeah. I think most people will have seen the movie Patch Adams,
Yeah.
and what that's about. So essentially, you're doing that in a psychological sense rather than and obviously not in a hospital base, in the primary one that you were talking about, that primary level. What's the goal for the Laughter Clinic? It's an organisation. Is it just you in the organisation?
At the moment, it is just me.
Yeah.
And I do a lot of rural stuff, regional stuff, like go out to communities and, Like next week, I'm flying up to Moranbah, to a mining town up there, to do a community laughter clinic. I'm doing one in Moranbah and one in Dysart. But it depends, like it's developed into a situation now where I've got a 1 hour keynote presentation which covers everything, but then I can also specialize, like when I was up in Townsville last month, I was talking to the new interns in the emergency department about suicide risk assessment, and what that looks like, and because there's lots of different suicide risk assessment protocols out there. What's the one that I recommend? And self-care for mental health self-care for doctors and first responders and all that sort of stuff as well. So I've become really specialized in, like I say to people, I talk to everyone from men's sheds to mining companies about this stuff now. You know what I mean? I've developed a life skills masterclass where I also go into schools now and talk to 16 and 7 year 11 and 12s about, important life skills that they need, because, as you'd know, the suicide rate in adolescents is quite high, and poor mental health. But also, I do work for an organisation called 4 Aussie Heroes, which is a not-for-profit down here in Brisbane, and we run an 11-day live-in rehabilitation retreat for high-level post-traumatic stress disorder first responders and veterans, right? And this organisation was started back in 2017. It might be me and one other person who have presented at every single program since its inception. It's called Triumph Over Trauma, and so it's doing the work with these guys that I've really been aware of the similarities between what first responders and veterans go through, and the family, the impact on the family, like aside from that instance on the cruise ship with that guy and his wife, like I've had police officers that have been in our program, and, so what they do is they come in on a Monday. It's a live-in thing for 11 days. It's all very holistic. It's everything: equine therapy, diet, trauma-sensitive yoga, all sorts of things, right? And it's always evidence-based practice. So after the first year, we were getting all this evidence from the people that were coming through, and there was an overwhelming suggestion from the participants that they said, look, this is all great, but there's about half a dozen of these sessions that we do that we really wish our partners experienced as well, and mine was one of them, right? And so now what happened, so the program changed its format in a bit. So the participants come in on a Monday morning, and then on the Friday afternoon, the husbands and wives and partners show up, right? Okay. And then they have dinner with them on Friday night, and then they get me. So I'm the first thing that they get with the partners. So I give them like the gold standard laughter clinic. I spend about an hour and a half, 2 hours with them on the Friday night, and then the partners are with them all weekend, and then they go, and then the participants spend the rest of the week in the program, But to hear the comments from the partners, like having a police officer's wife come up to me after a night session and say, look, my husband had done, military service and worked for the AFP and all sorts of things. But, when he came home from this specific shift, that something had happened, his light had gone out, and so to see him laughing and having a good time and relaxing, you really get to see the impact that. So when I thank people for their service that work in the first responders and the military, I always say to them, I totally acknowledge the toll that service takes, not only on you, but on the people that are close to you, because it does take a toll. It doesn't only take a toll
100%.
on you, it takes a toll on the people around you.
100%. Yeah. I know when I went through, I did a trauma clinic up here through a private hospital, and I was asking them if partners can come in, and we did do an outpatient one where they were involved with a few things, and it's vital because they are almost ignored by every organisation. I don't think most of these first responder organisations throughout Australia uh, put anywhere near enough into the families and supporting the families. I think as defence, there's a lot out there, but for first responders, there's very little. And I know for my wife, yeah, it's been over 2 years and it's still rough. And I think with going to your session and something like a laughter clinic, seeing somebody you love who doesn't smile much anymore smile gives them a bit of hope.
Oh,
And once you've got
absolutely.
hope, you can get past anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Hope is so incredibly important. And we forget, like when I'm talking to because I very much center a lot of what I talk about in relation to self-care, um, I say to the participants, I go, look, I'm not reinventing the wheel. We all know this stuff. It's just that we forget it. Because we're all busy doing life, and life gets in the way. And
Yeah.
so my things are, I say, look, there's 4 things that I want to remind you about. That there's things in your life that make you happy. There's things in your life to look forward to. There's things in your life to be grateful for, and there's things in your life that make you laugh. Right? And so when I'm doing a presentation, it's not just me standing on stage talking at them. I actually go out into to the audience. Hey, mate, stand up. How you going? What's your name? Tell me 5 things that have made you happy over your lifetime. Tell me 3 things that you're looking forward to. Tell me 3 things that you're grateful for today, you know, and make it very interactive, And the other
Yeah.
part of that, the other part of those 4 pillars, I say, is what is your me time? Because it is incredibly important to have something that is yours and yours alone, whether it's reading, writing, gardening, surfing, fishing, push bike riding, whatever it is, playing music, listening to music, gaming, whatever it is, but having something that is yours and yours alone for you to zone out and, like I know it's obviously not meditation sitting there clearing your mind, but in a way it is, because it's allowing you to switch off.
Absolutely. I've always, fishing's always been my thing my whole life.
Yeah.
Now, I'll be the first to admit that since I got injured, I don't do it as much. You do stop doing the things that you love to do, but I've always called it the therapy of fishing. Yeah, I can go not catch a thing and go back the next day, and it was just as positive. It's just as therapeutic.
Yeah. No, I totally get it. I love fishing as well for that very reason. My wife goes, "How can you sit out there for 4 hours and not catch anything and be happy?" And I'm like, "Because you just don't understand. It's just I just want to be out there, But I play golf as well, and that's
Yeah.
another thing that's I'm very lucky that I have a lot of those me time things, because I'm very conscious that I've got to really look after myself, especially given the field that I've chosen to work in now.
Yeah. How do you self care now? Because I'm imagining you've heard some horror stories, some really personal uh, journeys and things, and they have to have an effect. So
Oh,
how do you self look after yourself?
yeah, absolutely. That's a great question, because I have heard some, horror stories from farmers. I've heard some horror stories from, police and paramedics and veterans and stuff. And and look, I'm grateful for the fact. So, like when I was saying about working on a cruise ship, right, living with your audience, at the end of my 1 hour show, right, at the end of my gig, I say to them, look, if anybody's interested, I also work in the field of mental health. I have a project called the Laughter Clinic. It's human laughter education for people with stress, anxiety, and depression. Check it out if you're interested. And then I give them another few minutes of stand-up, right? Guaranteed 100% of the time, between me saying that and me getting off the cruise ship, I will have at least 1, 2, 3, possibly sometimes, people come up to me at different points and they'll bail me up. I'll be sitting there having a coffee or something, and they'll sit down and go, "Hey, mate, how you going? I was interested in what you were saying the other night." And they'll either tell me about their suicide attempt or someone they've lost or whatever, and it's fantastic that they feel that they can talk to me, right? Because talking is the key to everything, like social connection is so incredibly important. So I'll always give them the time of day and spend as much time with them. And where else am I going to be, right? So for me personally, to answer your question, how do I look after myself? I try and maintain as best I can my morning routine. So I suffered for depression for 15 years, and then I got diagnosed that my depression wasn't actually depression; it was misdiagnosed ADHD, and so I got put on a 2-year program of changing everything around, and it was very much centered around a morning routine of getting up, doing some form of exercise, meditating. I learned to meditate, writing in a journal, which to this day I believe journaling is probably one of the most powerful mental health tools at your disposal. Getting all of the junk out of your head and just stream of consciousness writing on a daily basis is awesome. And so now I try and, the house that we've bought's got a pool. I get up every morning, and no matter what the weather's doing outside, if it's freezing cold in the middle of the winter, I'd still jump in that pool after doing some exercise on the treadmill, or I do some martial arts stuff. But like I said, I've got a lot of me time stuff. I try and play golf twice a week. I'm a bonsai guy. I like my bonsai trees, and I've got a big, beautiful fish tank that I sit and maintain and look after. And I play the guitar every now and then. And I've got I'm a car guy, so I've got a little sports car that I'm a member of a car club and involved with that. So I try and keep myself, socially active aside from going and doing, because when I go to work and do a gig or a presentation, I'm at a conference, I'm surrounded by people, but I also try and make sure that, I spend a bit of time on the golf course with my mates, or, the guys in the car club or something like that. And, because that to me is, I'm really focused on this in the last 6 months. We talk about mental health, we talk about physical health, but there's not enough talk about social health. How being connected to a community environment is so good for life satisfaction and living a long, fulfilled life if you feel as though you're connected to a community. And unfortunately, we live in a time where the sense of community is rapidly diminishing. And so I'm trying to, get on my soapbox and say, try and find a way of being involved in a community because it's good for you.
Couldn't agree with you more. I think we're the most connected and disconnected we've ever been in history. We've also got lazy as far as connection is concerned.
Yeah.
To the point where I actually organised a catch up with some guys from a Facebook group about 10 days ago, and as a direct result of that, I've started up a Facebook group up here called the Men's Society, and it's purely a men's socialising and networking group, just so that blokes can catch up. We can host an event, and if it's something they're interested in, they might be able to come along and meet somebody and gain a mate.
Yeah.
Because I think it's bloody hard to make mates nowadays when it's not sort of forced upon you through children or that easy stuff. It's hard to make a mate as a bloke, and as it is for women, I've got no doubt. But that social connectedness is so important.
Yeah, and this is one of the reasons why when I go to the golf club, when I'm booking myself into golf, I don't usually play with the same guys every single time. Like sometimes I do, right? But I've got about 4 or 5 different groups of guys that I, shuffle, I tart myself out to these different groups and stuff, and I'm out there to have fun, and so when I'm out there and I'm with a dummy spitter, like I don't know if you've ever played golf, but you get some dummy spitters out there, and if I'm
it's hilarious.
if I'm out there with a club chucker, if someone has a dummy spit and they're in my group, I just go up to them and I whisper in their ear, I think someone needs a cuddle.
Yeah, when they're dummy spitters, you got to give them a bit of fuel on the fire. They're hilarious.
Oh, look, I say, mate, fuck, I'm out here to have a good time. You got to understand, this is my relaxation. You having a dummy spit, you fucking piss off with that shit.
How do people get a lot of first responders and veterans that listen to this? So how would they get hold of being able to come to this Triumph? What was it called? Triumph Over Trauma?
Triumph Over Trauma. So if they looked up the letter 4 Aussie Heroes, the letter 4 Aussie Heroes Foundation, and get a hold of them via the website there. And the website's quite good because it kind of goes into the history of the organisation, and it's so we're at such a really exciting point in the journey of the 4 Aussie Heroes, because we're in the process of. So the whole time we've been running these programs, we've done it at a training facility at Boona called the Outlook, right? Whereas due to some incredible generosity from some big corporate sponsors, we've actually now got our own purpose. I think it's like 30 acres of land out there that we've got buildings being built, and there's staff headquarters, wow. and it's going to be a full 4 Aussie Heroes. It's called Camp Courage, out at Peaks Crossing, and so we should be running our first programs in our own purpose-built facility probably in the first half of next year. So we're at a really, really exciting point in the journey of the 4 Aussie Heroes. We've just got a new CEO come on to take some pressure off the founders, who's, Jerry Garrard is like 78 years old. He's a Vietnam vet. He, started the program with, he got a lot of advice. Do you know a gentleman called Paul Scully? Does that name ring a bell for you? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so Paul Scully co-designed the program.
Yep. He was one of the guys who developed the psychological well-being services in the Queensland Ambulance Service from memory.
That's right. That's exactly right. That's the guy. Well, in actual fact, Jacinta Hallgood from Griffith University is his daughter.
Oh, there you go.
And so, so I actually recently got this from Paul, got him to sign it as well. You see that?
Yep.
Fantastic.
Oh, yeah, yep.
That's
okay. Now, for people attending, is there a cost? Does it need a referral?
For the 4 Aussie Heroes Triumph Over Trauma program, the cost is involved in getting there. That's it.
Yep.
Like, we have a lot of interstate police. For some reason, Victorian police, we seem to be getting a fair few of those recently. But the program itself is free. I think I'm not too sure what the referral process is. You would have to check with Jerry. It usually is a referral, come from someone. But the program itself is free. Live in, all your food, your accommodation. The only cost involved is actually getting there. That's it.
For people that aren't on work cover anymore, who have been in the first responder agencies, where your medical expenses are no longer paid, if you've got PTSD or you're living with those type of traumas, then please look out for this and really give it some consideration. If you don't have private health insurance, to go and do one of these type of things at a private health insurance place, like a private clinic, costs around $800 a day to stay in these things. So money is a huge prevention for most people. So the fact that this is out there, take advantage of it. Reach out. And yeah, it's something I'm looking at doing, and I've spoken to other people who are also interested, because the more you have these experiences, the more normal you can kind of feel, and the more you actually get some hope and some positivity leaning forward.
Oh yeah, and honestly, if you got on that website and looked at the testimonials from the people that have been through it, like one that comes to mind was a paramedic who was 30 plus years as a paramedic, and he said it was without a doubt a program that saved his life, like
Yep,
physically saved his life. And having, you know, the same type of um, being with a cohort that you're not. It's not all just paramedics. It's not all police. It's, you might have someone from the Navy there, someone from the Army there. We've had prison guards come through the program.
yep,
Paramedics. Probably the majority that we see, Peter, in all honesty, is police. We probably see police
yep,
the most. It's really unfortunate that we have campaigned and campaigned to try and get this program ratified by Queensland Police and some to them to send people straight there. And unfortunately, they do they say that they do a good job of looking after their people because they've got this program, Our People Matter, and it's like, fuck 'em, what a load of shit, they don't matter, And so we
yep,
have, and I'm sorry if there's any higher ups from Queensland Police that are listening to this, but I mean, seriously, we have incredible evidence to show that this program saves lives. And it's not only, we don't finish the program and then send them on their way and that's it. We bring them back 3 months later for a refresh weekend. We check on them, we follow them up, we do and we've got data. We've got all of the data to show that this works incredibly, and that's why this problem amongst the police forces, it's not only in Queensland, obviously Victoria's got a big problem. We've had a lot of Victorian police come up, and we have New South Wales cops as well, and you seem to, the commonality. I'm not too sure what it's like for paramedics, but I know for the coppers, a lot of them say, well, look, you just keep your mouth shut, mate, because if you put your hand up to say that you're struggling, it pretty much sets a timer on your career, which really echoes what I heard the podcast that I listened to. Your police mate up there, what was his name?
oh, Shane,
Shane.
Shane.
Yeah, exactly what Shane was saying, right? About, say you either bottle it up and don't do anything, you put your hand up and accept the fact that you're probably going to get shuffled out of the system, or you try and find a way to seek help outside of the system and don't tell anybody, right?
Yep,
And believe it or not, that's probably we get a lot of police come through that when we're getting testimonials and stuff, like they're quite happy to put pen to paper and write a testimonial, but you know we don't want to do any video testimonials. We don't want our photos in there. We don't want, like I can't take photos of when I'm doing a laughter clinic with those guys and stuff because, a lot of the times I don't want other people to know that they're there, which is
yep.
a horrible, horrible situation to be in, and yet they come away from the program having changed their life.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's one of those juxtapositions that you're taking care of yourself, but by taking care of yourself, you can actually limit your career, and that has to change. I
Yeah.
think it is slowly, but it takes people to talk about it. We need to take the shroud of secrecy off and need to own it. The These jobs break people by their very, very nature of the trauma you go to. We see things that human beings shouldn't see. We sign up for it. We know that that's going to happen, but we need to be looked after and we need to be able to seek help in a safe and encouraging environment. And unfortunately, I just don't think enough happens after you're broken by the job.
Well, that's the whole, the new field of study into moral injury. Like I know that you're going to be talking to a friend of mine, Nikki Jameson, about this. She's got, I'm sure you'll have a fascinating chat with Nikki about moral injury, and and so the awareness that's coming now to the fact that this is actually a thing, and you've not only got, you've got the trauma of whatever it is that you may have seen in the process of doing your job and different call outs and what have you. A lot of police officers I see in our program, it's working in child protection a lot of the time that brings them undone, and I'm sure as a paramedic you see instances where you're dealing with little kids, which is it's probably a lot hard to deal with. But then you've also got, when you're being let down by the organisation that you're working for, you've got this added organisational trauma to come along with it, where, the people that are there that you're supposed to be looking to support you and help you get through this, so as that way you can continue to serve the community and be a, functioning member of society and all this sort of stuff. When you're feeling let down by that organisation, that does contribute to it, I would imagine. Well, there's research to show that it does. It absolutely contributes.
Yeah.
That's why there is an actual thing, organisational trauma.
100%. I came back from I made an appearance on a TV show recently, and they were I was talking about the uniform is like a shield of it's a sheet of armor. It's a body armor, but for that trauma that comes through the psychological trauma. But when the organization removes that armor, that trust, then those spears start to hit their mark, and eventually it causes injury. So while we feel, you can put on the uniform and feel 100%. Over time and over little instances of a little bit of distrust or a little bit of harm, then that armor, small chunks of it come off, and there's just more areas for trauma to land, and all of a sudden what was okay is no longer, and then once you start to bleed out, all the trauma comes out. You never forget these things. You just get really good at putting them away and compartmentalizing them. But it's once you've got that arterial bleed, then everything starts to come out.
Yeah, well, hopefully we're in a phase at the moment, maybe with the Royal Commission shining a light on, defence and veteran suicide, and I saw yesterday was the day that the government announced, I don't know when this podcast is coming out, but they announced that they're going to adopt the vast majority of the recommendations. They say that they're going to adopt a lot, but I think out of 122, they're going to adopt 107 of the recommendations.
Yeah,
So
I think the only one they've rejected, the only one they've rejected that I'm aware of is that the commission suggested a different payout compensation for training versus operational injuries.
Yeah, I saw that one.
Don't have too much of an issue with that being rejected, but I'm sure the commission had their reason. I haven't read that.
Yeah, I haven't had the opportunity to go through the full response yet, but it is something that I want to try and have a good look at over the next couple of weeks to see what it is that I get sick of lip service, Peter. I really get sick of lip service. It's action. Enough with the fucking reports and white papers and inquiries and stuff. Right? These are the recommendations. Take action. Spend the money. Take action. And that's why I applaud you for doing this. I applaud the guests that you have that come on, the people that are listening, because it is all about taking action. Because if nothing changes, nothing changes. And it's one of those things that we're lucky that we probably live in a time where we've got the technology to be able to do this. You're up in Townsville, I'm on the Gold Coast. Who knows where this is going to land, and that's one of the things.
Absolutely.
That's one of the things that I've had said to me before, and I'll say it to you. You'll never know, Peter, how many lives that you've saved by doing something like this. Because you'll never know what audience it ends up, in the earbuds of, or you give a piece of information to someone and then they recognize one of those warning signs or something in someone else. And, so all you need to know is that what you're doing is a good thing, mate, and just keep doing it.
Yeah, and that's literally why I started it. I wanted to help somebody recognize in their own self or in someone they love some symptoms, some stories that might indicate they need help. And I've already received emails from a couple of people saying, "Hey, I've just, I listened to that. I've got a similar thing.
Mm.
I've got some help." And that's all you can do. And on the other side of that, I think what I would love people to take a lesson from what happened to you. If somebody makes a difference to you, let them know. Or if if you connect with somebody, if that woman didn't take the time to come and see you with her husband on that cruise ship, we don't know where you'd be. That sliding doors moment is huge, and her taking the time to come and say that and having the bravery to come and say that to somebody and admit that vulnerability and then how good it was for them, that's life changing for you, not just them.
Oh, and I have tried numerous times over the year, Peter, to track that couple down. Unfortunately, I gave the guy a card at the time. I'd run out of DVDs, and I said, "Look, here's my card. Email me when you get home. Email me your address, and I will send you a DVD for free. Right? Just
Yeah.
promise me your email." And then I never heard from him. Now, whether he lost the card or whatever, I don't know. But I've tried numerous avenues to try and track down this guy for a couple of reasons. One, I'd like to know he's okay. And secondly, I
Yeah.
would dearly love for them to know what resulted, what ended up happening as a result of that chance encounter. Like
Yes.
what I do now as a result of
Yeah.
that night. You know,
How many
um,
lives has he saved as a result of that encounter?
it's impossible to say. It's impossible to say.
Absolutely.
So, having said that, I do. If you wouldn't mind, I would like to. It would be remiss of me not to. I would like to impart a little bit of information in relation to warning signs. A few warning
Of
signs.
course.
Um,
Of course.
it's very complex and complicated suicide prevention, but I talk about these three warning signs for the reasons that they're easy to remember, easy to recognize, easy to do something about, right? And they are hopelessness, isolation, and burdensomeness. So, hopelessness, I got nothing to look forward to in my life, mate. Everything's shit. I don't even know why I'm here. Warning sign. That's an active warning sign. Isolation is um, not so much like physical isolation, obviously, is a risk factor, right? Being in the middle of nowhere, but emotionally isolating yourself from friends, family, workmates, shutting everyone down, shutting everyone out. Um, and the last one, burdensomeness, is the one that is actually the big red flag, big ticket item that rarely gets mentioned. So I need to be very specific with your listeners here that if you hear this sentence or something similar, my friends and family would be better off without me around, right? That's the big one, right? That is the big one, because in their mind, they actually believe that to be the case. I have felt that way myself in my time going through depression. Luckily for me, I never enacted upon it, but I do understand what that feels like. Um, and in that person's mind, they honestly believe that to be the case. And that's why I get annoyed when I hear people say it's so selfish to take your own life. And in actual fact, if you the psychology of it, it's quite hard to actually take your own life. And these people honestly believe that they're doing their friends and family a favor. They'll be better off with it, and they will never, ever, ever be better off without them around, ever. The
Yeah.
the trauma and the grief associated with losing someone to suicide is incredibly complicated, and it's not like losing someone in a car accident or to cancer or they grow old. It's totally different. And so, if you hear someone express they feel as though people would be better off without them around, you need to find a way to get that person some help. And what does that look like? Firstly, obviously we've got the "Are you okay" day thing, and asking someone if they are okay is one thing. But what I urge people to do is if you do have someone in your life that you feel as though you are a little bit worried about, get a little bit educated before you ask that question. Find out what's beneficial to say, what's not beneficial to say. There's numerous resources. The "Are You Okay" Day website. There's another website called Conversations Matter, which is incredibly good as well. and just give yourself a little bit of knowledge so you go into that conversation a little bit prepared and a little bit armed, and it's not about you trying to solve their problems, or telling them what to do. It's a case of finding a way to collaborate with them on a way forward. And so, because it can be confronting asking, and it's a myth that we've dispelled now. For a long time, there was the thought process that you don't ask someone if they're contemplating suicide, and we now know that not to be the case. We now know that.
Absolutely, yeah. That was a direct question we would ask all the time. Are you suicidal? Do you want to end your own life? And do you have a plan on how you would do that?
That's right.
If they've got a plan, that's a next step as well.
That's right. Yeah.
There's a difference between having suicidal ideation.
Yeah, but for the general whoever may be listening, that's not in this field, in the first responder or defence field, arming yourself with a little bit of information, so as that way you're a little bit more confident when you go into that conversation, is incredibly important. So hopelessness, isolation, burdensomeness.
Well said. Yeah, I think Are You OK Day is a great concept, but it's one that's fraught with danger if you don't know what to do if they answer no.
Well, yeah, and also just simply, not only that, Peter, but there's a difference between me saying to you, "Hey, Peter, how you going? You all right? You okay?" And you're going, "Yeah, mate, yeah, I'm all right." And then you're following it up with, "Are you really okay, though?"
Yeah.
Ask it a second time and put the word really in there. "Are you okay?" Yeah, I'm all right. No, are you really okay?
It's very Australian in nature. I get it probably is in most of the Western world, but very Australian. It's like, yeah, mate, I'm good. Or yeah, or what's the living the dream, that type of
Yeah.
stuff. They're very dismissal. They're actually a non-committal answer.
Yeah.
They're just may as well be a supermarket checkout person who's asking the question. It's a non-committal answer.
Yeah.
Right.
No, that's
All right,
exactly
mate. Well,
right,
what's your dream? What's your dream with the laughter clinic? What's the goal?
mate. I really enjoy being in front of people. I like traveling around the country and talking to as many different groups of people as I can. Sometimes organisations will, contract me to go and talk to their staff about something. I might go and, I've worked for mining companies where they want me to go out and, fly in, fly out workers and that sort of stuff. Next year, I'm going to be partnering up with a psychologist in Brisbane and a guy, Stephen Woods, who runs Employee Wellness Australia on the Gold Coast here, to, for a couple of reasons. One is through Stephen, we're going to be running some really substantial mental wellness programs for workplaces, because people spend so much time at work that it's a perfect opportunity. It's, outside of the first responders and defence work, because I'll always do that, working on getting into employee wellness, I think, is a big thing as well, and spending a little bit more time in schools, doing my life skills masterclass for the year 11 and 12s.
Yeah, that's awesome, mate. How do people get hold of you if they want to?
Well, you can basically check out everything on the website, which is thelaughterclinic.com.au, and everything's there, all sorts of bits and pieces. There's some useful info there. There's some tools that you can use and take away, and that sort of stuff, and all the different services that, not only myself, but I can contact people. We can run a stand-up comedy workshop. We can put on comedy shows, and also do obviously all the mental health presentation stuff. So, the laughterclinic.com.au.
And you do MCing, keynote speaking.
MC conferences, MC. I'll MC just about anything except for a wedding. And the only reason I don't do weddings is because I say to people, you want your MC at your wedding to be someone you know.
Yeah.
So, but other than that, yeah, comedy gigs and stand up and MCing, I pride myself on being a good MC. When I first started doing stand-up, a mate of mine said, "Get good at MCing, mate, and you'll never be out of work." And he's right, because a good MC
Yeah.
makes or breaks an event. So I do pride
Yeah.
myself on that. But yeah, doing the keynote presentations and traveling around to regional Australia is, like I was down in country Victoria at the end of last year at a place called Alexandra and Yea. And so this is a community that is still suffering after the Black Saturday fires.
Yeah.
I didn't realise that they'd lost over 120 lives down there. And so this is a long time ago, and so a community foundation got me down there to do. So I did a couple of community laughter clinics and went into a couple of schools and that sort of stuff. So when I go into schools, I do a laughter clinic for the adults, for the teachers, self-care, all that sort of stuff, and then I do the life skills masterclass for the 11 and 12s. And just going into communities that have been impacted by something bad, and being able to remind them about those things, about, happiness and gratitude and looking forward to things and the importance of humor and laughter. Giving people some takeaway stuff that they can walk out and go, if it helps them, great, but they might be able to pass that information on to someone else who goes, you know what, I see Steve at work struggling. Maybe I'll mention to him about that sort of stuff or whatever.
Yeah. 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 You never know who you're going to reach through other people. You literally never know.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah. And you still doing stand-up comedy gigs?
Yes, mate. I've got a gig to do at 7:00 tomorrow morning. Right.
Oh,
Yeah, for a heap of tradies for their Christmas party.
ouch.
Right. And then I've got another one 7:00 the following morning, and then headlining the Sit Down Comedy Club in Brisbane this Friday night, and then next week I go on a comedy cruise, which is 5 comedians on a cruise ship for 3 nights, 3 days. So that's always good fun.
That's awesome.
So yeah,
That's
I'll
awesome.
never not do that, mate. Stand ups, making people laugh. It's the best,
Okay. Yeah. There's no downside to making people laugh, is there?
No. So before I don't know how we're going time wise, but before we go, can I share a quick joke with you for
Please
you?
do.
Right, it's not mine. I can't take credit for this, right? But it's given your audience. I know that it might be something that is appreciated. So this is a takeaway joke for anyone that's listening to use. Tell your friends, tell your family. It's easy to remember, right? So a little old man's in a car park and he reverses out and he smashes into a guy in a ute, and the guy in the ute jumps out all angry. "You smashed into my car, little old man. You got to give me $2,000 to fix it or I'll bash you." And the little old man goes, "I don't have $2,000. Well, you give me your money or I'm going to bash you." And the little old man goes, "I'll call my son. My son is a dolphin trainer. He'll know what to do." And the bloke in the ute goes, "I don't give a shit what he trains. I want my money." So the little old man rings his son, bloke in the ute, rips the phone out of his hand and goes, "Your dad drove into my truck. I want $2,000 to fix it." The son goes, "All right, I'll be there in 20 minutes. Well, bring $2,000 or I'll bash you." So then the son rocks up, kicks the shit out of the guy in the ute, kicks the shit out of him, turns to his old man and goes, "Dad, how many times have I got to tell you? I don't train dolphins. I train seals, Navy SEALs."
I love it. Love it. Mark, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on, mate. It's been really good to talk to you, get to know you, and you are changing lives through every aspect of it, through your For Aussie Heroes involvement, but through your laughter your laughter clinic. I'll put all the links on the posts for the podcast so that people can get hold of you. I fully encourage people to reach out. Talk to whoever you need to get down there and get on. If you need some help, if you're not on work cover, I don't know whether it's something work cover would contribute towards. I doubt it, but ask the question. There's no harm in asking anyone. But if you're not on work cover, if that's all finished and you have the opportunity to get down to this Triumph Over Trauma program, what's the harm in asking?
Yeah, absolutely.
It'll change your life.
It will change your life. Absolutely. I've seen firsthand that it does.
Yeah. Good on you, Mark, mate. I really appreciate it. And I wish you all the best. Good luck at your 2 7 a.m. comedy shows. That's got to be a tough, you're not even warmed up.
No, it's fuck, who's funny at that hour of the morning? I mean, seriously. I mean, come on,
Yeah, you're already you're looking uphill to start that one. So good luck. Hey, if you can get a laugh at 7 a.m., then you're doing something right.
Yeah, they're tradies, so I know how to talk to these guys.
Yes. Good on you, mate. It's
Love
been a pleasure.
Work, Peter. Love your work, mate. Well done.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. Okay. Bye-bye.
See you, mate.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Beyond the Call. If you like what we're about, please make sure you subscribe, and if you can leave a review, that would be appreciated. If you have feedback or suggestions for future guests, please contact me via my socials. Please share with your networks and help me expand my reach. It's a great privilege for people to share their stories and allow us to go beyond the call.